In this presentation, I want us to have a look at the pest analysis as one of the analytical techniques that we learn in this subject. So we're going to cover what a pest analysis is. We'll have a look at some of the variations to a pest analysis. We'll also look at what occasions, when do we actually use the pest analysis. I'll talk a little bit about the benefits of the pest, and then finally a little more in depth on how we might use or conduct a pest analysis. So that's what we'll cover in this presentation. So the first thing we need to know is what's pest. Well, pest stands for political, economic, social, technological factors. The idea of the pest is to structure our thoughts to conduct what we call an environmental scan, and that really is looking at the operational environment that you're in, or looking at the environment that you're wanting to interact with or gain intelligence on. So the pest forms an analytical tool that leads us to further analysis of and conducting that environmental scan. And as I said, the environmental scan is really about looking on the horizon, seeing what's taking place, and being able then to have a better understanding of your environment. And that's really what it's about, knowing what's going on. The next thing, as I say, it really helps us with understanding the environment, which I've mentioned, or even the environment operation. So the battlefield, or it could be a town, a country, it could even be an outlaw motorcycle gang. Anywhere where you're planning an operation or you're wanting to know more about, you would conduct a pest analysis. Now, there are variations to the pest, and you'll come across this in your practice and also probably in your reading. In addition to the pest, so the political, the economic, the social and technological, there are some variations. There's the pestili, so to speak, where you're looking at not only the political, economic, social, environmental, or rather technical sections, you're also looking at the environmental, legal and industrial aspects. There's also the pestlum, which again goes a little bit further, but instead of looking at the industrial aspects, it looks at any organizational aspects and the role of media in that particular environment as well. You then have things that it's known as STEP or STEEP, where it's social, technological, ethical, economic, but also includes ethical and political as well. And finally, we have the STEP LED, which is social, political, economic, ethical, political, legal, environment. You can see it all there. The problem with the variations is, and a lot of scholars or Intel study scholars will say that this is probably a bit too much. That simply using a good pest analysis, just simply the political, the economic, social and technological factors are probably sufficient enough. And adding these extra ones really just makes it a little bit more difficult to understand. So I think for us, it's best to concentrate on a simple pest approach. And in some aspects, I think that things like political and social can actually contain a lot of what these other ones are purporting to add. So yes, there's variations, you'll come across them, you're welcome to use them, but keeping to the fundamentals of pest is reasonably probably a good idea. So there's some of the variations to it. So when do we use it? I've mentioned it a little bit before. We want to understand the environment of operation, so we want to know the areas that we're working in, and not just obviously the geographical areas, but the more social aspects of the environment as well. And we use it because it helps us structure our thinking. So it helps us work out, well, what aspects of their environment do we need to know and understand? And so it provides an opportunity for us to categorize and to ensure that we've gathering all the information that we need, and we're not just grabbing bits and pieces from everywhere, but we're more systematic in our approach. So we're looking for the political, we're going to look for the economic, now we're going to look for the social, then we're going to look for the technological aspects. So it helps us characterize the information that we're collecting. It also helps us understand who the actors are in the environment, the individuals or the organisations, or the political parties. So it helps us identify them, which can then ask us to lead into looking at those actors in a little bit more detail. It also looks at forces. Now, forces aren't necessarily armies and so forth, militia and so forth. It can also be forces of anything that's changing that environment. So it could be changes in economics, it could be changes in technology. They're forces as well. So again, the PEST helps us identify the actors and those forces of change that are taking place. And understanding actors and forces of change and understanding the environment helps us build more knowledge to develop even further analytical techniques, as I've got here, such as competing hypothesis or predictive estimates. If you know the forces, the actors, the environment, then you can start to make even more sense of what's going on. So the PEST is really important as a beginning tool to get your mind and get your understanding of the operational environment. So the benefits, which I've sort of talked about or even already, it helps us structure our thoughts, so we ensure that there's no aspect of the environment that we're looking at that's left out of our consideration. So we know that we've covered the areas that we need to cover. It leads us to gaining a greater knowledge of the operational environment, so we know what's going on. And as I said, we start to identify key actors, key forces of change that are taking place. And importantly, all this structures our research and structures our information collection. And that's really what a PEST is about. It helps us structure our thoughts. And that's what I think is one of the greater benefits of doing the PEST. So how do we construct the PEST? Well, first of all, we need to make sure that the intelligence requirement we're given by command or that we've developed is actually compatible with a PEST. PEST works well, again, like the SWOT we learnt about, works well with qualitative data, not so much quantitative, although you can use quantitative. So we need to make sure that the analytical tool is suitable to the question that's being asked. We also then need to think about developing a collection plan that will provide us with the relevant information, so we can add that to the PEST. So we need to know, well, what information do we need to get, for example, to get a better understanding of the political aspects and political environment. So we develop a collection plan on that. We then draw up a table to compile our notes, and I'll show you one of those in a moment. So we put our notes under each of the headings of PEST. And then we look at writing our PEST product, our intelligence product, but not so much just saying what it is that we've collected, but explaining on why what we've collected is important. So it's that constant so what factor. Why is a certain political situation relevant to the intelligence that we're collecting or our operational environment? So we're writing a product that helps link all that back together and explain why that's significant. Now, just to conclude, I'll show you an example of a PEST that I've just made up about a fictitious country called Country A. And you'll see here that this is where I would be compiling my notes and observations as I collect them. So as you see, I've got here that Country A is a dictatorship. That's a political point. In economics, I've got Country A manufactures and exports tin pots. That's something else. Country A has a high male population. Country A has little internet access outside of the city. So we start to build a picture of Country A through conducting our SWOT. And again, we would, in writing this up, explain why this is important to our to understanding our operational environment. So that's a few, or a very brief presentation there on how to construct a PEST. On the Interact site, there's an activity and a few other videos that you can watch that will assist this. And you can also look to the text, which will help you provide you even with a bit more detail about conducting the PEST analysis. And as always, give me a call or make contact if you need to discuss further.